I'm here at Naga, at one of the Kushites' most well-preserved sites here today in Sudan.
Temples were really important, both in Kemet and in Kush.
When you begin to look at the development of temples, the temples that we find in Nubia, the temples that we find in Egypt, the temples were universities.
In many respects, they were kind of mini universities. So you have your Egyptian elite living in the temples. They were developing languages, they were developing mythology, they were developing the religion.
There were places where the so-called priests, who were actually priest scholars, part of a system of learning.
And the fact that the temples not only acted as places of worship, but places of learning also.
One was the house of the book, and the other one was the house of life. Her Ankh, meaning house of the life, house of life.
The education was holistic. So you couldn't study maths without studying geography or biology. Everything was interconnected.
These priests that came out of these systems were to be the guardians or the custodians of this cultural practice. They were not theoretical religious people. They were individuals who were both warriors, both scholars, and both priests at the same time.
It might be important to look at the system of education as a system of formal learning and the system of socialization as a way or the way in which one generation was socialized into the fundamental values and rituals and meaning of life of the community and therefore of the society.
The belief was that you weren't born man or born woman, you were born male or born female. And through the process of passage, then you became male or you became female. The passage was intended to be arduous, rigorous.
They would have had to have gone to the temple and gone through certain rites of passage.
The socialization has to do with becoming an adult, with knowing your roles as an adult.
And the training was both physical, both mental, and both spiritual.
And a lot of this came to rest in the temple, where you had schools in the temple.
The temple itself was not to be worshipped. The people themselves understood that they were the most sacred thing, not the temple.
All the professions were premised upon somebody having completed what is called scribal training. To become a scribe was really to achieve the platform from which other careers took off.
What I also find very interesting and very attractive about the Kushite civilization was that, unlike in Egypt, where it was only the educated classes and the priesthood and so on who could read and write, in Kush they achieved a high level of literacy. That meant that humble people could actually read and write and were encouraged to do so.
In actual fact, I don't think there's any modern equivalent to one of these temples. They were both centres of scholarship, but they were also the centres of religion.
So the custodian, the intellectual custodian, was also a spiritual custodian. Was also the warrior custodian. In times of war, it was they that pulled up their cloth and went to war. It was also they that kept the spirit of that nation alive. It was also they who kept the intellect of that nation alive in books and study. So there was no separation. Kemetian philosophy is so monotheistic. All of it was part of the one science, which is life. This science was not separate from religion. So the science and the religion were combined together.
And it's that understanding that everything is interconnected, which is the spirituality.
Everything in the cosmos, in the universe, is related to everything else. We're all interconnected.
There is an understanding that there is one central energy source, but with different aspects. The aspects are represented by how we call in the Western world gods. But there is never a thinking that there isn't one monotheistic central source or power. There is the understanding, whether you're in Kemet, whether you're in Nubia or in Kush or in any of these kingdoms in the Nile Valley or any of the African kingdoms that follow subsequently, that there is one central source or energy from which everything comes from.
Clearly they share the same religious beliefs as with the Egyptians, with some additions, so to speak. Some local gods were worshipped, like god Apedemak, a lion god. And you have to remember that lions were common here up until the early 19th century.